And good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on your MTN statewide news on this Thursday. I'm Andrea Lutz. We do start this afternoon with a developing situation out of Billings that started around 9 this morning. Law enforcement are actively searching for two armed men. At this moment, they say that residents in the Billings Heights area should remain locked inside of their homes as they investigate. Well, just moments ago, we did hear from Billings Police Chief Rich St. John. He gave us an update on the situation. We're going to tune into that right now.
This incident started in the Shepherd area. Apparently, a property owner interrupted a theft or a burglary, confronted two male individuals, ended up chasing them off, and then ultimately was starting to give chase in a vehicle, I believe. One of the individuals in the suspect vehicle had a weapon and fired at this property owner. I believe the windshield was hit, and I believe he was hit either with a ricochet or a direct shot. At some point in time, the sheriff's office became involved in the pursuit, and that ended up here in Billings. We were poised to assist as they came into town. The pursuit ended up in a dead-end cul-de-sac on Sahara here off of Aronson. The two suspects drove into somebody's yard, into their backyard and right up to the precipice of where the rims are. And then they bailed out of the vehicle and went down into the wooded and heavily foliaged area in the rims.
And if you are watching us from the Billings area, we continue to follow that story, and we'll have updates for you online and on air. All right, Governor Steve Bullock addressed the state this morning, announcing that the November 3rd general election, well, Montana counties can choose whether they want to go all mail in ballots. The governor's announcement comes 2 weeks after county election officials asked him to make that choice. County officials said they needed to start planning ahead of time for how they can conduct that general election. Bullock says county officials know what's best for their local elections and that many have had serious concerns about being required to hold an in-person election on election day at polling stations during the pandemic. The governor also noted that June's primary election was conducted entirely mail-in ballots, and it was an all-around success. Bullock saying the decision to allow mail-in ballots is in the best interest of the public health and the rights of citizens to cast their votes in November.
It only makes sense that we start preparing now to ensure that no Montanan will have to choose between their vote or their health. They didn't have to in June, and they shouldn't have to in November.
Well, Montana's 2020 election has plenty of high-profile competitive races, including U.S. Senate, the House, of course, and the governor contests. All right, this afternoon, Montana has added 173 new COVID-19 deaths, and that has increased, obviously. Yellowstone County adding the highest number of new cases with 47. Bighorn County adding 3 additional deaths, but those deaths do not yet appear on the state's reports. Our state's COVID-19 active cases are over 1,500. There's been almost 3,000 recoveries. Taking a break from all of this news for right now to, of course, check in on the weather with our Ed McIntosh. How's it going outside?
Yeah, you know, we've got showers. We've got a few thunderstorms that have been developing through the morning hours, especially in western and southern Montana. They're continuing to develop here through midday. Take a look at what's going on with Doppler and satellite right now. We'll continue to watch some of that. Now, there are some lightning strikes that along with some of this. And while it looked like a lot of rain activity, not that much is making the ground. But with that lightning in play, certainly we could see some strong wind gusts and winds with the potential for some wildfire starts. Tomorrow, even though things cool down a little bit, a big area of north central and northeastern Montana under a fire weather watch will still have the warm temperatures, the low humidity, and wind will become more widespread tomorrow. We'll take a look at that potential for thunderstorms today and those fire weather conditions for tomorrow and what's ahead in the 5-day forecast. That's all a few minutes from now.
A back-to-school plan from the Bozeman school superintendent is being met with some serious opposition from parents. In his proposal, half of students would go to school part of the week. The other half would come in for the rest of the week. Well, students would take part in online learning on those remote days. Yesterday, dozens of parents gathered outside schools to protest that plan, saying that they want their child in the classroom full time. Some voicing concerns about parents who don't have resources for online learning. The Bozeman School Board plans to meet again before making a final decision on that. Facebook and Twitter have deleted one of President Trump's posts, which the social media giants labeled as misinformation. Trump made misleading claims about children and the coronavirus as he pushes to open schools. Natalie Brandt has more details on this from the White House.
The White House is slamming social media giants Facebook and Twitter for deleting one of President Trump's posts.
There's very selective shadow banning, removal of tweets for really the one man who's made Twitter the most popular of all, and who has over 200 million followers on all social media platforms.
This is the first time Facebook has removed a post by the president, calling it harmful misinformation. Twitter froze the president's campaign account, demanding it delete the tweet with this video.
If you look at children are almost, and I would almost say definitely, but almost immune from this disease.
The CDC says more than 250,000 children under the age of 17 have been infected. Studies do show they recover better than adults, but they can potentially spread the virus to older people. President Trump has emphasized children are not as impacted by the virus as part of his push to reopen schools, which he says is critical for the economy to recover. This morning, the government announced nearly 1.2 million Americans filed new unemployment claims last week. That's down from the previous week, but there are still 16 million Americans receiving unemployment benefits.
Many families who are concerned about being evicted, tens of millions of people who are on unemployment insurance. We have to come to an agreement that meets the needs of the American people.
Extended unemployment insurance remains just one of the sticking points as the White House and Congress continue to negotiate a new coronavirus relief package.
That's why I will not be adjourning the Senate for our August recess today, as has been previously scheduled.
The White House has set a Friday deadline for negotiators to reach a deal. Natalie Brandt, CBS News, the White House.
President Trump says he will take executive action on evictions and payroll tax cuts if Congress cannot reach a deal. However, it's not clear what those actions would be or what authority he has to take anything unilaterally. Well, the state of Montana is asking the federal government to extend the deadline of the 2020 census. So far, only 56% of the state's households submitted a form. It's the lowest response rates in the nation. Montana leaders say they had a plan in place to reach residents that haven't replied. Earlier this week, the Census Bureau moved that date back to September 30th. Montana hoped to gain another congressional seat based on the last 10 years of growth. But if responses aren't turned in soon, the state could miss out on a lot of federal funding.
They're not counted. It's just that simple. They don't exist in the eyes of the census. It means that, if one person is not counted, Montana loses about $20,000 over a 10-year period. And when you start adding that up, so if it's 10 people, 20 people, 100 people, 1,000 people who don't get counted, starts to add up to be real money for the state of Montana.
So if you haven't yet been counted, you can call the Census Bureau or go online. It's my2020census.gov. We do have more news ahead on today's Noon News, including a look at a barn that is older than the state of Montana, but it's taking on a new look. That story is coming up. But first, Ed is up next with your statewide weather forecast.
Starts now with meteorologist Ed McIntosh.
Welcome back. This is usually a pretty busy week across Montana as a lot of the motorcyclists make their way over to Sturgis for the rally there. But there are a few challenges in store as we start getting into the next couple of days. Hot temperatures today, especially east of the Continental Divide. Thunderstorms are already starting to develop. And as we get into tomorrow, some wildfire concerns, especially across the northern portion of the state. Dry and warm conditions will follow, and things actually get a little bit quieter by the time we get into the weekend and early next week. This noontime, we have temperatures in the 70s to 80s in central and western Montana, and then starting to pick up on the 90s into eastern Montana. A few isolated storms rippling through northeastern Montana, but you can see most of the activity with some lightning strikes as well as we start looking into the western portion of the state. The winds generally less than 15 miles per hour, but there are some stronger gusts starting to develop in northeastern Montana as that front starts to approach that region. So here's the thunderstorm activity. Some flickers of lightning around Bozeman. We've seen a little bit up around Great Falls, Helena, up along the High Line as well. So as we start getting into the afternoon today, this weather system will continue to progress from west to east across the region. All of these green shaded regions showing where we have some potential for at least some spotty strong storms, wind being the biggest threat later in the day. So things look fairly active as far as the radar goes, even here as of midday, but a lot of that is just going to be wind gusts that will push down towards the surface. Hot temperatures into the eastern plains could reach the mid to upper 90s, and if we see a triple-digit report by later in the afternoon, it's not going to be a shocker. As the front continues to rumble through, we could even see some isolated areas with hail, especially in southeastern Montana. Tomorrow, temperatures back off a little bit, but we're still warm enough, 80s, low 90s for the daytime highs across northern Montana, that with the wind, especially you can see that highlighted in the blue shaded areas here, along with the low humidity, does increase our fire risk, and there is a fire weather watch into effect for tomorrow from around lunchtime into the evening hours. Another disturbance moves through as we go through the day on Saturday. So Saturday into Sunday, we're going to see the temperatures back off, and we'll see those temperatures start to push down even to below average in some cases. Today we're looking at 80s and 90s. Already with the thunderstorms starting to develop the cooler air towards the west, the heat is on into the eastern plains with that chance of a shower thunderstorm I mentioned. The overnight temperatures from the 40s around Butte to mainly the 60s as we look off into the eastern plains. Tomorrow, we do have those fire weather concerns where the winds start to increase from around Helena, Lewistown, Great Falls northward. As we get into the afternoon, we're looking at 70s in areas of western Montana, 80s to low 90s as we look into especially areas of eastern Montana towards northern Wyoming. Look at the drop of the temperatures around Kalispell and Missoula. Pretty pleasant with the highs in the 70s on Friday and Saturday, starting to warm up a little bit again after that. Isolated thunderstorms around Great Falls and Helena. We've already seen a little precipitation there with the temperatures into the 70s by the time we get in towards Sunday. For Bozeman and Butte, looking at a slip in the temperatures tomorrow. Butte, you could be in the 70s for the highs for a couple of days. And then as we get into eastern Montana, we'll look for isolated showers and thunderstorms to develop as that cold front moves through tonight, especially from Billings southward, but then the temperatures back off a bit. There's a look at the weather. Back to you, Andrea.
All right, thanks, Ed. A barn in Sun River is getting a facelift, but it's not just any barn. MTN's Isaiah Dunk takes us there.
The J.C. Adams Stone Barn has been a staple in the Sun River Valley for quite a while. Local rancher J.C. Adams had it completed in 1885, so it's actually older than the state of Montana. With its large size and Romanesque revival architecture, it's said to be the only barn of its kind west of the Mississippi River.
He built the barn mainly to provide horses and cattle to Fort Shaw, which was going strong at that point in time. He came from Kentucky. That's part of the reason why he built such a beautiful big old barn. I noticed the barn almost the first time I drove by it. It just jumps out at you.
The barn fell out of private use in 1979, and it's been registered as a National Historic Place since then. Over the last 4 decades, it's seen numerous restoration efforts, and this week, the most recent one is finishing up. A $10,000 grant from the Montana History Foundation has helped with new red paint for all the wooden surfaces, plus restored window panes and other work.
It's been wonderful, actually. Overwhelming in the sense that, planning the weather, the subcontractors, the supplies, everything's kind of late coming in, but it all came together, so it went really smooth, actually.
And in its heyday, the barn even held roller skate parties and dances for Valley locals up in the hayloft. Its unique size, location, and style make it worth every effort.
The alternative is it not being here any longer, and as it deteriorates, it's just kind of an eyesore. So, raising the money to make this happen or getting a grant to do it is just so important for everybody in this area, as well as the families that live here. Neat history and a lot of fun memories for everybody.
In Sun River, Isaiah Dunk, MTN News.
That barn is gorgeous. The J.C. Adams Stone Barn Company, I should say, is always looking for more help. So if you're interested, your latest ag news is coming up after the break.
Ag Network.
Hi everybody, it's time for your farm and ranch news. Well, with the threat of wildfire on the rise, Montana Senator Steve Daines, along with California's Dianne Feinstein, have introduced some new and bipartisan forest management reform legislation. They say the bill increases active management of federal forests, cuts red tape, reduces frivolous litigation, and also gives the U.S. Forest Service the right tools to protect our communities from deadly wildfires. Highlights of the new bill include directing the Forest Service to complete 3 landscape level and collaborative projects in the West to help reduce the risk of wildfire. It encourages the USDA along with the Department of Interior to increase use of wildfire detection equipment, and also creates a forestry workforce development program and even establishes a new prescribed fire center here in the West. In some other news today, the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank now says that COVID-19 has certainly created substantial challenges for all segments of the meat supply chain, but especially for producers and consumers. Of course, beginning back in April, outbreaks of COVID-19 at our nation's meatpacking plants led to significant disruptions and created issues of oversupply and low prices for livestock producers. The spread of COVID-19 among employees led to closures and slowdowns at many meatpacking plants across the country. And those closures were especially prominent in the beef and pork industries. Now, the agricultural economy had been in a prolonged downturn before the pandemic, intensifying concerns of how the coronavirus and disruptions in the meat production could affect farm and ranch finances well into the future. Well, stay with us. We'll have more ag news right after this. Well, it looks like farm and ranch bankruptcies increased some 8% over a 12-month period, with 580 filings from June of last year to June of this year. A 6-month comparison, however, does show the number of new Chapter 12 filings slowing just a little bit, so it's a little bit of good news here of late, at least. Now, several contributing factors, they say, are likely at play as farmers and ranchers continue to struggle to stay afloat during this ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Now, the Midwest, Northwest, and Southeast were hardest hit, representing 80% of the filings across the entire country. In fact, Wisconsin actually led the nation with 69 filings, followed by 38 in Nebraska. Georgia and Minnesota each had 36. Now, the American Farm Bureau Federation's president, Zippy Duval, says that every farm or ranch bankruptcy potentially represents the end of a family's dream. So it's imperative that Congress address the challenges facing farmers and ranchers, both near and long term. Regarding coronavirus relief, don't forget that the CFAP program has divvied out almost $7 billion to date, and there's still time to get enrolled or signed up for some of this money. All you need to do is contact your local FSA office, or better yet, get online, get more details by visiting farmers.gov/CFAP. Well, that's a look at your farm and ranch news. Have a great day.
Thanks, Russell, for that. We do want to just give you an update on our top story that we brought you at the very beginning of the show, a developing story that's coming out of Billings. Law enforcement has decided that they are concluding their search operations. This is coming from a tweet from the Billings Police Department. A safety sweep of the area was conducted without locating those armed suspects that we told you about that were on the loose in the Billings Heights and Alkali Creek area. They say there's no injuries to law enforcement during the search, but anyone with information is asked to contact dispatch. So we continue to follow the updates on that, but it looks like law enforcement is going to move away from the area. We'll have the latest on that at 5:30. But Ed, anything else that we can hear about from the weather?
Yeah, thunder and lightning. That's going to be the story, and we'll have more at 5:30 on your local news.